welcome to Frame Rate, the show where we rate frames and general film appreciation podcast. Hey everybody, hi, I'm Abe Epperson, and guess what? I have a co-host.
Surprise, motherfuckers! It's
Yeah!
not like usual. There's two this time. Michael here, Michael Swaim, as well rating frame. And excited for this sort of Christian kick the frame rate has been on lately, you know? We did Last Temptation of Christ.
That's right.
Now we're talking Leviticus. Right. Yeah, dude. Hard turn into an evangelical podcast. That's what I'm here for.
I missed Last Temptation of Christ. I need to listen to that. I apologize.
You do. Yeah. And who are those sultry tones emanating from? Please introduce yourself, our very special guest.
Hello, I am Brooks, the person that they call when a movie is weird.
That's right.
Hey, that's good. Yeah, that's a good description of it. And this movie is weird. Today, we're looking over Mad God, 2021's Phil Tippett's The Master. You know him from the meme, the dinosaur supervisor from Jurassic Park. He's the guy who he's the guy who invented the line in Jurassic Park, I think we're extinct, when shown computer animation for the first time. Stop motion artist, go motion frontiersman. He worked on this film for 30 years alone. Well, not alone. He had some students work on it with him. There's actors in it and stuff, but more or less all the puppetry, all of the filming was more or less done on his own time, a labor of love project. And it is, I don't know, how would we call this? Experimental horror film, stop motion experimental horror film, I guess.
Refresh me. Yeah, that's a fair approximation genre-wise, but like, Brooks, did you nudge us toward Mad God? That was in a list you gave us, right?
It was. You guys, I think, wrote, because I keep begging to do, I'm thinking of ending things. Apparently y'all are on a Kaufman hiatus, which is fine. And so I just started throwing random films that are exceptionally strange that I think would be very interesting to talk about. And it's Mad God's on that. It's not so much a genre thing for me. I find like the unique thread in the movies that I keep throwing at you guys is that I think they'd be interesting to talk about. And because they are so either esoteric or weird, or there's discussions to have, this one specifically, about how medium and message may or may not necessarily coincide well enough, or how they work together. Sort of it came up because I know we discussed Anomalisa, and I love Anomalisa, and we had a discussion about stop motion there, and this feels like another way to continue that. So,
and we have had discussions about like kind of lumonarrative in general.
Yes.
So that will be a good discussion. I definitely want to take a moment just to do the appreciation, which I think is the lens that most people kind of perceive this film, which is the absolute, artistry that's at work
should we
here.
Just get that out of the way? Like, it's an accomplishment of technical craftsmanship that's almost unparalleled in terms of stop motion. Right? Or Brooks, you'd agree with that, right? As a technical feat.
The first half of the film, absolutely. It's the first half of the film is unspeakably stunningly beautiful, and I don't care how grotesque anything is. I was in awe of almost every visual, how it was done, how things were shared on screen. The opening scene, for example, the grandeur of it and the grandeur of the factory and all these things. It's one of those things where there's moments in it where you know that there's more cleverness going on than you can tell. It's someone once showed me the behind the scenes of the first Dune movie, where they basically had a matte painting 500 yards away from the actual scene and were filming through it in order to utilize forced perspective. Like that moment, I didn't pick that up ever until seeing it literally in that behind the scenes. And I feel like there's so much of that in this that is like, it just shows, again, he's the guy. This is the dude who did all of this stuff. And it's so clear in so many moments.
Yeah, RoboCop, Starship Troopers, Jurassic Park, Star Wars, and you can see kind of the echoes of what he finds fascinating, or like the mechanisms that he can create, the little machines of the puppets. Like, for example, there's a big worm thing that is at one point stabbed with like Yeah, exactly. Is stabbed with a huge like 3-pronged needle and gets murdered.
Ah, that one.
And I couldn't help but look at it and go, that is like it smacks of the brain bugs from Starship Troopers.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like it's just the way it moves and the way it's scared when something's about to prod it. Some of the coolest shit I've ever seen. There's also completely new stuff like the mud moss monsters that keep getting burned by a furnace, like very stark imagery. What were you gonna say?
Oh, it was
Michael?
interesting that you call those monsters. I felt very sympathetic for the moss mud men, who I thought kind of represent us in some way, but yeah, there's no dialogue to speak of, so we'll have to get into, of course, what we thought the major themes and things represented. But I was just going to say that there's something so familiar about the specific way that he does stop motion, Tippett, that I found myself feeling nostalgic for, which is a very weird thing to say, for the way in which the things moved. Not even the particular designs, but the actual, I'm like, I can tell that it's Phil Tippett doing the stop motion. It does feel different than a Leica or a, any other you care to name, the Nightmare Before Christmas guy or what have you. But yeah, so I can encapsulate this really, really quick, which I think I should, because then I want to bust through too. So great. Brooks alluded to the second half being weaker, but we all agree that the highs of this movie feature some really, really keen stop motion and design, right? But in a nutshell, it's the story of this non-speaking character who I guess the screenplay identifies as the assassin, being sent down with a briefcase bomb to go fuck something up. And he wanders around this dystopian hellscape going down and down and down. And eventually his bomb fails to go off initially. He's captured by a doctor who performs surgery on him, pulls a weird worm out of him. That worm is taken by this floating plague doctor creature into a subterranean base where it's like condensed into soul glitter, and that soul glitter is used to create an explosion that seems to cause a universe to form. And then the assassin's bomb goes off, and then there's some other imagery. So I'm glossing over everything, but just so people who've never heard of this get the gist, it's like a weird, trippy, psychedelic trip through a very unpleasant environ. And it has a bunch of, big swings that I think are meant to be archetypal symbols of what Phil Tippett is interested in discussing. So, since it has no dialogue and is just sheer imagery, I think it's a great place to start to just ask, what'd you guys get out of this? Or did you feel that sense of dawning comprehension? Did things congeal in a way that made sense to you? Or did it just seem like a ramble through hell?
Yes.
Yes, both?
Yeah, I would say both. So for me, there were moments, I think, again, and first half is probably the wrong way to put it. I think just, again, it's hard to get away from how the movie was made in the 30 years and like the meta commentary on the film without in talking about the story. But I think you can tell that there are parts where he had a very clear vision of what he was going through. And there are parts where you can start to see threads come together and then almost unravel and then not really ever come back together again. And then suddenly something else. And you can see that there's kind of this, it felt, at least to me, early on, that there was larger commentary about how systems of violence produce themselves and how, again, we're going to do spoilers? Like we're just doing spoilers?
Oh,
yeah.
Go for it.
Yeah, the assassin ultimately is also part of the same machine as the rest of the industrial world he's going into to destroy, that is ultimately about building a new world that in the end comes to the place where, hey, look, the assassin's here again. And it's this kind of never-ending cycle of violence that perpetrates violence. That's kind of what I've got out of it. But I'm really stretching, I think, at that point to say that for sure, because there's a lot that points in other directions, and I don't know if he really had an idea for that.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Brooks on the yes to both. And I ditto on the kind of, I think that it meanders in a way that is not necessarily unpleasant. I mean, unpleasant maybe to some viewers because it's literally unpleasant, but like it's not necessarily like I would say something that I would knock against it, because I think it's an experimental, in it, not necessarily a tone poem, but definitely something that's not trying to grapple with the narrative and it's not narrative front, narrative facing, I guess. It's, for example, something that I notice about Craftsman style, like if you look back in film history and you look at someone like Stan Brakhage or something like that, where it's like you're using the medium in a completely different way than anyone else is using the medium, or like Norman McLaren, who's an animator as well. Like it's pretty amazing what they accomplished in this just by watching a series of shots. Usually the inserts in this, because they have so much control over it, it creates this weird feeling where it's like it'd be easy to just get some concrete and get someone wearing the right shoes and just have the person do it. It looks so good when the final product that it almost does look like that, but they're so advanced in some of the stop motion that you're like, well, then why don't you just do live action? Because
they did. No,
yeah.
they
Well, I
did.
mean, I know they did live action, but there's some stop motion shots.
I know you mean. There's shots of his feet walking where you're like, you could have cheated that. That could have been people easily.
And
I there are some of those that I believe he did.
I think there was. There's also, a lot of the what is it? A lot of the footsteps and stuff you can
specifically the footsteps on the concrete. I actually think the vast majority of those that are showing like down, the way that the paper falls, the size of it, the setups, either he has ways of doing stop motion that I've literally never seen before, or it's live action. And also to mention, the two people who've ever asked if he used CG in this, he never answered. Just mentioning.
I think he did compositing. He also did layering.
No, straight up CG, not compositing.
CG. Oh, okay. Yeah, we'll see. I
wondered about
maybe one day they'll say
baby in the blood jar at the end. That did look CG to me.
There's a couple things in it that, again, the paper's falling. There's a handful of things that very much look like they were added, and I found this to be where the distraction away from the story. I want to stick with Abe's first point, though, because I think, to me, the pacing and experimental nature of it, the way the story was told in the first 30 minutes-ish, if that was the whole movie and it kind of kept that aloof, not really telling us an even 0 words thing all the way through, I think it could have been incredible. That he went away from that and it became kind of this sort of anthology of random moments sort of towards the end. The pacing, I think, shifted and he tried to tell a story. It's almost like when he began it, he had faith in this vision, and then over time he tried to turn it into a thing and give it a point, and it kind of didn't, to me, it didn't land at all.
Yeah, I don't think he was ever that interested
in conveying a clear message.
Yeah, and designing a message that he's even not. I mean, I think he wanted some form of coherence. You know what it reminds me of, and people have listened to some frame rates. There's a era of animated like cinema that no longer exists anymore, and it really happened in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, where you get these animated kind of shorter films. The one I'm thinking of that we covered on Framemator's Fantastic Planet. And their whole point was almost to not have a point. Like it was always, I think that Brooks' earlier suggestion about like there's a cyclic nature to this, he doesn't make specific mention about like war profiteering, but there's some impulse to, we must create this society and the society will self-destruct. That is the nature of things. That seems to be his commentary on it. And I don't think it's necessarily important to him that he's consistent in that. It's just that you think about that at one point. It's mostly here to see the monstrosities, right? The amazing kind of like, look at the imagination of it. And I think I think he's very aware that that's how people want to see. That's what he's a craftsman. They want to see that part. And so because he's aware of that, I don't think he goes out of his way to ensure that there's, narrative elements that really nail it home what he's trying to say, because I don't think he's trying to say anything.
I disagree, which is good for podcasting. I think there's clear indications that he does mean stuff that's pretty clear, but it's not sophisticated stuff. It's pretty basic. Like, I mean, the fact that it opens with the Leviticus quote of God explaining, it's, you know, the angriest God ever gets in the Bible, where you read it and you're like, Jesus, this God is very upset. This God will fuck you up. And it's like, well, you know, I understand the theme of, so this is just a visualization of what would the universe be like if God was that evil? Maybe this. And I gotta say, it's up there with Hieronymus Bosch for a chilling depiction of hell to me. Like, the two things that really struck me, one was just the viscerality of the very Bosch-like, the giant guys getting shocked and shitting their guts out all the time, and then a monster.
Titus Welliver's Bosch is what you're referencing, right?
That's right. Yeah, of course. The series Bosch. Yeah. It has that same grungy feel. No.
Well, there was that episode where he and his wife were eating piles of shit made by electrical.
Yeah, turning them into blood pods. Yeah.
And he turned around and he just had a huge set of titty balls.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God. The slave overseers that just splatter shit out of their titty balls butts.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's some freaky shit in this, but I was on a ramble about how it actually has some cohesion. And I would just point to things like, for example, the Tower of Babel having the big red sun behind it, and that shot is exactly recreated in the end when we have the pocket universe destroy itself, right?
Right.
And
which is like the hackiest hack shot. Like, it's stuff like that I'm just
fair, but it speaks to intentionality.
No,
like,
no,
it's
I'm 100% siding with you. I don't think I think maybe even I'm landing between you guys. I think early on, he was doing this. I don't even think he started necessarily with it being a grand commentary, more of a, hey, this is going to be the worst place ever, and it's going to be his hyper nihilist version of our world. Mm-hmm. And there's little bits in there. And then over time, it became, he had to have a grand point. And it even ends, I mean, it ends with you mentioned it earlier, the weird shot with the baby in the jar. There's no way to me that's not like a direct reference to 2001.
Oh, yeah, because there's the monoliths as well.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just like,
like the complexity of Kubrick's statement, you're just co-opting there. It doesn't really fit your narrative.
I think he's refuting it. I think he's saying, in his opinion, so in 2001, the baby was used to show that humans are destined to ascend to a further level of consciousness, or have the potential to in some way. Sure. I think he's saying, no, we don't. We're just fucking fetuses in jars, you know, like I feel like
I see
whether you agree or not, I think the message of the film is a cynical message, which is that human and / humanoid civilizations are always destined to self-destruct, because that is the way of things. I don't even know if I agree with that message, but it's fine to say, right? Or that's okay to enshrine in a film if that's your thought. And that is what I got from this, is just a big meaty swing at. I'll tell you the other thing that felt intentional to me that I did find chilling and impactful, which was that because the assassin doesn't speak and we follow him, I thought he was a good guy, or I was always rooting for him just by sheer instinct, just because he's the main character, right? I was like, oh, this is our guy. Okay, he has some goal. I want him to succeed or whatever. And then slowly but surely over the course of the movie, you realize, as Brooke said, he's also just the same as everything else in this world. Like, he's a piece of shit. He sees that monkey thing getting tortured and he just ignores it. He sees the moss pyramid slave guy getting stomped by an overseer and he just ignores it. And you're like, oh, the guy we're riding with is also a sociopath. Nothing is good in this world. Nothing is.
I don't know if it's intention. I don't know if those moments are intentionally trying to make you think that he's a bad guy. I think they're trying to say he's a cog in the system and he has a mission. Like, he's being sent on this mission, and he is as faceless as the other monstrosities in this world.
That's what I mean.
He is of this world.
The dehumanizing is interesting.
He's dehumanized. Yeah. But I think that there is a hope is the big, when we're talking about this concept of this nihilistic kind of bend, the question is, does your story have hope? I think that you're supposed to believe that there's hope. And I think the bomb is representative of that. And I think that the final ticks are kind of in a way of like Sidney Lumet's like fail safe, are supposed to make you believe that there is some semblance of hope that maybe we could restart a universe that isn't this horrible. But he doesn't go into it because he doesn't, I think in the end he only wants to parade around the monstrosity of it all and just show the world that he created. That's what I meant earlier by there's no narrative to speak of.
Well, so
it's not that he's not clear at any instance. It's just that, like in the end, I don't think it really holds water because he's saying both things. He's saying, yeah, that too.
Yeah, and
Sure.
that's I agree on that. The cohesive narrative, I do think he was trying for something. The one human, I just, there's a lot of issues I have with it. Obviously, they went and back and shot things. The one guy who sends the assassins down is named the Last Man. That's his name.
Yeah.
But he's not. There's like the surgeon and the nurse.
Mm-hmm.
So like, okay, well, that's weird. Whatever. But then like the implication is that, the machine is this big. It feels like the assassin is an interloper from outside the machine, but we zoom out and we see, oh, look, it's also part of the machine. Then we zoom out again. And then it kind of ends with the Last Man being the god on top of the tower looking down on his subjects.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, it gets so fucking muddled. Like, I am one for weird. And it's one of the things I love about this is, again, the first half feels like there's a lot more intentionality or thought or less thought, I guess. I would prefer almost less thought than a lot of the stuff towards the end of the film.
Yeah, I agree.
And like, but it feels like at some point he put in the wrong amount of thought, I think is how I would put it. And it sort of started becoming well, maybe this is that, and trying to force stuff that to me, again, the second half of the film mostly just didn't work. And I don't think there is a cohesion. I think he was trying to get to one, because if you look back, this is not a man who should be telling grand stories on his own. His big sort of breakout directorial writing hit was Starship Troopers 2. So like this is a person who like did this almost as a reaction. I don't want to ascribe too much to him, but the timing of the film starting right as CG was becoming a thing, and as he was seeing that this old format was dying, and he wanted to prove there's something more there. You can almost feel the parts of the film that are part of that energy versus the post Kickstarter, I'll finish this, I have to now, I've got $100,000, let's get a green screen in here kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I see that.
I see that once it might be an aspect of switching to using human figures, because I will say once the doctor and nurse become a thing, it starts to feel almost like a Sega CD full motion video game where you're like,
right,
it's just weird to see the doctor as a human in this context.
But it's also very poorly done.
It's done. That's what I mean. It looks like the comping is kind of sloppy.
It cost $100,000. Yeah.
Well, no, I wouldn't even say that. Like, let's say I told you guys, hey, we're going to do a scene with a nurse and a doctor. Like, you two would film better than that. I'm serious.
The practical effects, maybe not so much, but the lighting, yeah.
I mean, the lighting is not the strongest suit of the film.
You're right.
Well, it is early on, though. That's the part, though. It is, or like the first half hour, lighting is used so fucking well.
But if it worked on you, good,
as he's dropping,
I am not going to tell you what visually, your taste should be.
Right, however it hits you is how it hit you.
No, I'm not saying he's not making mistakes. I'm not talking about the overall cinematographic. I'm talking about the use of lighting. As he's dropping the capsule and how it's casting shadows as it moves down. For example, overall lighting, sure. This is not a brilliantly made film overall. I think the stop motion is phenomenal, but like lighting early on, things have a quality almost unto them that, again, if he had just carried it through, I think it may have helped a great deal, but it just, so much of it falls apart for me in the second act. So much.
Yeah, I think that's what works, is that I think sometimes those imperfections create an effect in the eye where you go like, this is what it ought to look like,
Mm-hmm.
And it's that kind of ought kind of situation that you fall in love with. And I think that that's fine. I think that that's how some movies work, especially in animation or stop motion, where it's like the weirdness of just the quality of images that you're getting and the motion quality of the motion is itself so loud that you can't help but like you can't ignore it, so you might as well embrace it. He does understand that aspect of it, which is what makes him one of the greatest stop motion artists of all time.
But also this film, and this is the other thing, and I'd love to discuss kind of, because we got into this a little bit with Anomalisa on the nature of the medium and the message and how stop motion tends to become the message itself. I found throughout most of this, let's talk about just the first like 20 minutes. There are scenes where the stop motion is spectacular. And then there are scenes interstitial in that he doesn't use stop motion at all. He has a remote control car or
driving through models. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's real time, or dragging a Hot Wheels truck across a 2x4. Like it was weird. There are weird moments of like, wait, like in the promise to me of this film took 30 years to make. And as you start and it's 100% stop motion, you're like, oh fuck, this level, it takes a lot to do stop motion at this detail. I can't wait to see everything in stop motion. And then basically slowly that completely dissolved. And the cars scenes, I think, were the first moment of it. The actor scenes took me out of it too. It's the medium so deeply pulled me back out of the story, and then I had to like force myself back in or just accept that they're cool visuals, and it was a very strange thing overall.
For me, too many shots of the doctor pulling coins out of his guts. I was like, we get it. Live action shots of hands. This is now not interesting anymore visually.
Sped up footage, baby.
Yeah. But again, I do think it meant something, or was trying to kind of mean something, right? Like, he was full of jewels and pages of written material, and then the little worm thing, right? It's like your thoughts and your value and your soul.
Spine baby.
Yeah. I don't know. I just it's interesting to me, Abe, that can you point to the part in the movie that made you think it had hope? Because I really thought it was an eloquent depiction of it's okay to make a movie where the message is, no, there is no hope. Life is bad. This is a movie about that. Or like landing on the side of hopelessness was really.
I guess
what I got
the way
from it.
I perceived this movie was that at first I was like, okay, so this is like Dante's Inferno, right? And we're following the pilgrim. And then I was like very quickly, oh no, this man has a mission. It is not that he's going to go into hell and just see what's up. He's got a mission, and that mission specifically is to bomb something, probably strategically, beneficial. And when that creature takes him away from the bomb, he's clawing for the bomb. He doesn't care. He's just trying to set it off. Like it's the most important thing to him. We are also set up in a world where, he's, I think the last, like as Brooks was mentioning, he's sent by the last man. And I don't think that we're supposed to be that confused about, I mean, it's neither here nor there, but like, we don't know if the doctor and the nurse are necessarily human. They are shot live action. That's what is confusing, and I agree to that end. But I think the whole intention of The Last Man is I think we're supposed to look at he's a king. He's also one of the only freely acting people or entities in the world, other than like the alchemist or like the mad god himself, I guess, is whatever that monster is. But I think you're supposed to believe it's the idea of agency. I have an idea of something that wants to occur. So where the hope comes from me is that you get some semblance of an idea that this bomb represents the destruction of everything. This is a horrible landscape, and it's like burn it all. It's complete. Yeah. And so if that's true, and the monstrosities that we're supposed to look at, we're not ever sympathetic for. In fact, most of the time we're being told this is a horrible thing to be a part of this. It
sucks to be around here, generally.
I think hope is kind of something that you can intuit that is like, is the bomb is there to destroy it, right?
So hope is the sweet release of death. That's the only thing you can hope for, I think.
But here's where there are issues throughout it, and I'm not sure if it's necessarily intentional, but there are let's just say the assassin, but there's also from the creatures made of the shit factory workers all the way through to the random animals. There is kindness and curiosity and care that comes from them and is projected in the moments of it. The assassin is not just simply looking out for things. He actually finds himself concerned with the well-being of things and pushing himself past. It's clearly broadcasted like 4 or 5 times. The factory worker that approaches him as he's coming down the hatch, who's curious about him, shows that they aren't just mindless automatons. The animals kept by the sort of weird Igor hunchback mutant thing that he ultimately does feed to like crazy spider thing are friendly, happy, caring, giving. Like, so there is hope, and it's the kind of thing like they use hope, but he never really dives to that next point of like, hey, actually hope is literally extinguished or not possible. Or
like what does hope do to nihilism? Like there's no causality in it, right?
No,
He's just saying they
I
exist.
thought there is a resolution in the sense that the plague doctor creature is trying to create a universe that's not so horrible. Or this is my interpretation of the ending, but I could be wrong. It's just what I got out of it. I thought they were taking the souls of the assassins and using them to create new universes in the hopes that those universes will somehow be not so bad. But as we see in the montage at the end, every time they make a universe, all that happens is, in the end, an assassin blows it up.
Yeah.
Like that is what life exists to swallow itself. Life exists to die. Like that is what life is. Dissolving to shit.
I guess that's true that in that interpretation where it's like it is cyclic and unchanging, then hope is an illusion. And so that means that just blunt nihilism wins out, and that is a point. So I would say that interpretation. I would agree with you. I don't know if I necessarily understand exactly what's happening in terms of like the restarting of the universe. What in the final moments of the film, what is being contributed by the magic gold dust that is the ground remains of
the worm that came out of the assassin,
the spine baby. What is the magic from that, and what is the magic that's coming from this bomb of dynamite that is to be placed in, I don't know.
No,
it's placed in the middle of nowhere, frankly.
And I'm with you completely, because this is where, Mike, I think you're right. I think the intention is this idea of those born of violence ultimately become violence. Like you can't have a child born of horrific means that won't sort of be born of that, like the cyclic nature. And I think, again, it's throughout the film, he's always pushing towards the cyclic. But I just don't think it ever really pays off, because he does a lot of shit to sort of like, dress up and make something pretty or make something add on to that. Almost like, not to use another version of cyclic or meta, but like it's all hats on hats on hats on hats.
It creates a lot of noise around the signal.
It's so much where you're like, but wait, why did that have to happen? Did that contribute? Did that change anything? Like, why did you even, if you can just make, why would you need this baby? If you can just make worlds, just go do that. Use something else. If this has never worked, why would you keep wanting? It just is a very like, I don't know, it loses itself in this idea of nobody has agency. And that moment when it's clear that the cycle never ends and no one has agency, that I don't know, it just falls for me. Like it's not even a good commentary on not having agency almost. It's a very strange film for me.
It's have you guys seen YouTube short films?
Yes.
The Backrooms?
Oh, no.
This is guy Kane Pixels, who's like a young VFX artist, and he's making this found footage horror stories as like a YouTube playlist, like a movie that's a YouTube playlist.
Cool.
And the story is, I believe, taken from some form or community-based storytelling website. And it's like the idea is it's like
is it
Stranger
SCP
Things
stuff?
Yes. It's like a Stranger Things-esque portal where you enter, instead of the upside down or whatever, you enter this enormous empty liminal space that looks like an office. And then at one point they find a creature and it chases them. But it's got the similar one person made it. Its artistry is clear to see. Like the artist behind it is you're like, this is done by one guy. This is better than most Hollywood.
It's a real.
This is incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's the narrative that's there is very stretched, where it's like, we're just giving you little bits of lore because we think that's cool, right? We think the lore is a little bit cool, and we want consequences to come from, like, we want beats to occur. We want a chase scene. We want a creature. We want you to be horrified in a new way in this set sequence. But like in order to get there is no writing really. It's just, and then we keep walking to the next thing. That's why I keep thinking about Dante's Inferno with this film, is that it's very much, I'm going to choose a format, I'm going to choose a structure of a story that is like walking into a zoo and looking at different pens and going, look at that now. And now look at that. If that is the reason for going to the house, and the house in this metaphor is the movie, who cares if it's inconsistent in the ending, or if the universe was made by, you know, a ground up monster, or it was made, you know, like by dynamite, or like what that matters. You're just here to enjoy the tripod type alien zapping people out of existence with a dick spear, you know, like that's what you're doing. And so I guess that's, to me, the main takeaway from this movie.
Film is a sensory experience. It's allowed to be just that.
And I think you guys probably agree. Well, feel free to not. But I mean, I know you guys know this.
Well, I don't agree with the tone, young man. Or like, I don't. You seem to be saying
yes,
it.
Sir.
You seem to be saying it as if that's a lesser experience than a film with a message, which I agree with on an emotional level. But I guess I'm trying to refute both of our instincts when I say we're big story guys. But film is also just a pure sensory experience, right? There's value in pure sensory experience, like in the animation itself. I suppose.
But you do agree with me, though.
I agree with you in terms of your cup of tea is also my cup of tea. I wish this had a more coherent story. And my brain stretches to make it have that. Like, I feel like there are sequences that are things, right? Like the factory sequence. I do get strong vibes of like, this is about capitalist exploitation and how capitalism destroys us all. But not in any way that's more, it doesn't go beyond that. It's just a tone. Like, yeah, you know, you see guys wandering around getting crushed by industrial bricks and things flying around, and you're like, I see. Yeah, fuck a job, right? Capitalism destroys us all. But there's no detailed insights on that theme. It's just a tone poem on like around that. And I guess I'm letting people who are within the sound of my voice know that, you know, like whatever you are, like if you're into things that are purely visceral sensory experiences, then this will be right up your alley.
The disconnected narrative thing, I think for me, and I'm someone who likes that. I think back to films like that sort of introduced me to that long ago, and maybe they're not a perfect allegory, but like Gummo, for example, that isn't necessarily a hyper tight, you know, building to a climax with a single character, and then it like it's a collection of stories that I think has threads that you come out the other side. I find myself moved by the idea that I think was sort of that Harmony was trying to go for with that, and I think there's a lot of films that sort of touch into that. This one, I just think those threads just got lost, and it's really hard to. Like there's the overarching thing, but it never really goes beyond what I would say like is like a 19-year-old, you know, first year college student of philosophy's sort of take on nihilism, or what suffering is, or
life
how
is
capitalism
sad,
destroys.
is bad. You're like, okay, yeah, sure.
and it's someone who you know read Ulysses or Dahlgren and went, hey, cyclical's cool. Like it doesn't have the things that make like Dahlgren's use of cyclical narrative or Ulysses puts us in a place where it changes the meaning of the entire text. When you realize this does not change the meaning of the entire text. Like it's basically the same movie the third or fourth time. I didn't find myself, you know, gaining new insights, understanding that the assassin was sent from the outside and is just part of the same machine, because it didn't change it. It just didn't change anything meaningfully.
Yeah, I mean, he's not. I don't think he's trying to. That's my personal
he's
take.
flexing his stop motion nuts a lot of the time. That is all it is. Like if you're asking, like I found myself asking like, well, why do the fates make the maps? What does it mean that the maps flake away and fall apart as you travel? And you're like, nothing. It looks cool.
He wanted, you wanted to create those weird lady things.
But if you love
a skin map.
This did really succeed for me in terms of density of nightmarish imagery, though. Like, if you do love weird, and if you do love dark and mutants and chuds and shit. How'd you guys feel it succeeded on that level? Like, this is, I think it's notable that it's a Shudder exclusive. It's considering that everything you're seeing, for the most part, I mean the stop motion portions, are just like goo and glue and paint and shit. I thought it was remarkably visceral and upsetting in a way that surprised me.
One of the coolest haunted houses I've ever seen in cinema.
Yeah.
But I guess more to Brooke's point, because I know what you're scratching at, which is that, like, if there's no ultimate purpose to this, like, then why are you treading in this space? It's kind of this attitude of like, well, if you're not gonna swim with the big boys, then fucking get out of the pool, kind of thing. Why is he trying to posit this narrative on us?
If you're commenting upon whether life has nothing to say, or not, that's a pretty big topic. Whether life is worth living, like, and I agree. I don't know. I don't know if that's the purpose or that's what we should be seeking out of something like this. Like, I make the reference of a haunted house. I think a haunted house can make a commentary about capitalism and have it be incoherent and still be a great haunted house, right? Would you agree with that, Brooks?
Yes.
Or am I completely...
Oh, no.
Okay,
no,
cool.
I think a lot of things can be brilliant commentaries on capitalism. Brave Little Toaster is a children's animated film that I think is a phenomenal commentary on capitalism. Trolls World Tour is an animated film that ultimately is about American exceptionalism and the way that imperialism works around the world. Like, these things can be done in very simple ways through animation. You don't need a great deal. I actually don't even know if I would say this is necessarily a commentary on capitalism. Like, this is where I started with it. I'm with you. It's, we're in a factory and these guys being electrocuted. You're welcome to try to tell me the symbolism of the induction of shit out of these guys. But monster eats them. Hey, yeah. And then they shit out these things. And then at the bottom are these humans that are like the refuse of the refuse that kind of get made, that work in factories that are expendable. But then, like, there's no secondary loop. Like, that is the end of that cycle.
But my question is, what's wrong with not having secondary loot for?
Because it's not, because the issue with having a commentary on capital or any of these things is you're talking about a system. It's a critique of a system. There's no system here. The system, there isn't one. You have to kind of show that beginning and end. There is no loop. The only loop is ultimately the grand one of, hey, at some point, a bug will be turned a baby bug will be ground into gold dust and make a new world where all this will happen again, which feels like it's almost more of a commentary on the nature of religion at that point. But even that, these are systemic commentaries. You can't have a closed ending. You have to you have to have the system keep going. Just saying, it's basically like, I would go back to what Michael said. It's like saying capitalism sucks versus showing why. And that thing where it's just kind of this almost angry old man yells at cloud moment throughout it, that they never quite got there.
Yeah, I agree that it would be better that says capitalism. Am I right?
Am I right?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. No, I agree 100% that, like, if this had that, it would be better.
But if you love weird shit, I just gotta keep pounding that drum, because, like, Trolls World Tour may be a more cogent statement on capitalism and imperialism, but Trolls World Tour doesn't have bird demons jerking off a minotaur in an alleyway. Like, I love how fucking weird, it's pretty and fucked up cool. It is. Yeah.
I think that's the interesting conversation to me, is like, what are we looking for out of something when we see what it's good at? Like, we ultimately recognize that Phil Tippett is not a writer-director. Phil Tippett is, an animator and stop motion, creator, a craftsman. What is the expectation, and what is, for us, we all have to ultimately determine, we all have something that needs to be filled inside of us that is like, this is good. and we're unsatisfied when he does this other stuff. And I wonder about when it's like the other stuff. It's the narrative that's clinging to a kind of simplistic, mundane message about something that's a lot larger and frankly deserves more thought. And they don't do that. They refuse to do it. They
stick with imagery. They
stick with imagery.
It's like you don't.
Is that a knock against it? And I don't know if I agree.
Because you don't go to an air show and go, that story was kind of weak. You know, you're like,
right.
Look at the fucking planes flying by. This took lots of technical precision and skill to pull off.
Right.
And that is kind of how I feel. You know, as Brooks has spoken, I have to admit to myself, even that part does fall apart in the second half. Like the technical skill is not as in abundance, but
even that
there are sequences at the beginning of this film where my mouth was agape with like
100%.
The stop motion is just wrecking shop right now, just at a pure technical level. And I think that has its own intrinsic value. I mean, we're kind of doing our own cyclical thing where we're like, it's good, but it's bad. It's good, but it's bad.
No, because it's both. Look, there's a moment in the film very specifically that I think it happened because I was watching this on a big screen in my living room, and I got to the point right where the shadow puppetry started, right before the surgery, which I don't have an objection to. I think shadow puppetry is cool. Any kind of stop motion. Like if at that point in my brain, I'm like, oh, this is just going to be a whole bunch of things. He's going to show us how amazing he is at this shit. And at that point I paused it because I had to go do dad stuff. And then I was like, I'm going to sit and rewatch this. I'm going to go. And I sat and I rewatched. And then at that point, it was the same moment. That was it for me. The rest of the film, there's still cool moments and they still kind of go back to it. But there's just too many moments of like, there's a scene almost right after that where we literally, it's not even stop motion. It's plastic unmoving action figures that are behind a grainy shot that someone is tilting back and forth. And that I'm just like, oh no.
And then compare that to the plague doctor floating by. That shit looks fucking baller.
Yeah, it's the moment the doctor and the nurse comes in and the doctor's looking through his memories or whatever, like the endoscope goes in his head or whatever, right? Yeah. And he's looking through his memories. And at that moment, everything is like done in real time. And it's done, I would say, again, if the whole movie was just that and it was like someone just putting a thing out, but it's done poorly after that. Like everything, there's a level of like, what are we doing here? What's happening?
There's a fall off. I didn't notice it until we discussed it, but it's absolutely true. Yeah, that's true.
When you go back and I'll send you the little animated GIF of the little moment where it's like, there's this panning shot behind Ash and it's, I think a guy raping a woman is the intention, but it's just two action figures like you'd see on a model train set. And you can't see their bottoms, but it's clear that someone's just tilting them back and forth. And they're not moving. They're not articulated at all. It's really, moment.
Question. And I know this is useless because it's like, what if movie was this? Which is a useless, kind of experiment. But because it's fun. If the movie was all the way to the bomb, we get to the bomb like being set up. And then instead of being taken away to by the doctor and the whole baby arc and the
flashback and the whole second half,
maybe it breaks down, but like we're talking about a movie that's maybe like 45 minutes long. Like we meet the mad god then, or the bomb goes off and there's like a crescendo at that point. We get our act 3 kind of climax there. Maybe he fights off the monster and sets the bomb off or something like that.
He takes the worm baby and puts it in the body of another assassin that he sends down.
If it wrapped up there and we didn't have the doctor and nurse sequence, we didn't have the wraith that like moves the baby through another horrific landscape, and we don't get the alchemist who crushes it down to gold and the restarting in the universe. What if we could even have the universe stuff at the end where it's like when the bomb explodes, it just restarts the universe, and that universe, it could still have all the nihilism that I think Tippett was going for. Now, of course, if Phil Tippett was here, he would probably be like, no, I wanted this, 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 and this. And you would cut that out, and that's bullshit. That's my movie. And he'd be absolutely right. But I'm just saying that version of that movie, would that not be like kind of perfect, right?
I mean,
I
it
think
would be
that
an
would be kinda
Oscar
perfect.
caliber. Like, that's a weird range. You're right. Almost no movie is 45 minutes. That's like a TV pilot.
30 minutes. It's 30 minutes that the doctor shows up, by the way, 30 minutes.
Oh, 30.
Yeah,
really?
but I would say still keep like 25 more minutes of movie.
You're welcome to tell me which parts.
It's once the endoscopy tube goes in his head, everything is downhill from there. I agree with that.
I think it's just, it starts sequences that are
Yeah, it
not
would be
worth
pretty perfect if
the
it was
effort.
just that. I agree with you.
I would say it would be,
And-
because it would be a nice tight little rondo
Mhm.
form. It would be like goes down, does a thing, success, and then it turned out to be useless in the grand scheme of things.
Well, and this is one of the discussions we had around Anomalisa, and I know we talked about it then. I'm going to go back to it because to me, Anomalisa utilized the medium of stop motion ultimately in purpose. It was part of the story ultimately intertwined, and you kind of lost yourself. We all talked about how, you didn't lose sight of the fact that it was stop motion and not actors, but it wasn't the focus. Whereas
Until
with this,
it was, right, when he takes his face off and you're like, oh, it's stop motion. That's right.
yeah, and it's these really, but it's used in a way where it's part of the story, I guess would be like it's narratively sound. This one, I think it's cool that it's stop motion, but I think this sort of is almost the antithesis of that. If this was not stop motion, would we care as much? And the answer is no.
That of course not.
Not
100%
even 1%.
not.
Right. No,
Not
that
even
is what
1%
it's
because
bringing.
the point of this is that
And
like-
but that would be my question then is if most of the film then is not stop motion, which it's not.
Well, I mean, I thought when you said stop motion, I thought you were more meaning broadly the aesthetic and vibe of everything going on.
There's still some cool aesthetics and vibe work in the second half, but it loses its stop motion aficionado aspect.
Yeah,
completely.
that's true. And
well, it
no
becomes
denying
real
that.
time.
Right.
Sure. Well, yeah, and it's all still pieced together. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It becomes dominant in live action and less, interesting visually.
And
But
I even
there's
assume the
still,
Plague Doctor is live action and comped in because of the way the cloth is floating.
It moves. Yeah.
There's a few.
there's-
The second half of the film, when he's driving, there's multiple shots that are straight up just him like running his
Sure.
finger along the map, and it's just a dude in a suit.
Yeah.
But, who cares?
Well, I mean, I do.
That's the great thing
Oh, yeah,
about
but I'm
a film
saying-
whose
but I'm
message is
saying
nothing
why-
matters, because then you're like,
That's what I
you
was
didn't
trying
like
to
the
ask.
movie? Who cares? Nothing matters.
Well, no, but I that's what I like 25 minutes in. That's why I was asking that question. I was like, why do you care though? It's other than because I do recognize the whole concept of like it could have been better. I'm not saying that it can't. I'm not saying it's perfect, any of that. But if this is supposed to be like, come in here to see this shit,
Come see the freak
it's
show.
gonna feel like this.
Yeah.
Come see the show. This is what the
I
promise is.
I can tell you why. If in the middle of Corpse Bride, if in the middle of Nightmare Before Christmas, if in the middle of any of the films that have done stop motion, and I think there have been a lot who've done it very, very well.
Mhm.
Stop motion is, yes, the thing you talk about, but you do lose yourself. If they switched at any point to live action and had straight actors, like,
You're angry.
well, the difference is that in stop action world, that is reality. This stop action world is the physical space that we're able to play in. It's the rules. Creatures are built X, Y, and Z. We don't really have a handle on how big the assassin is. There's multiple points where we see elves, which are also parts I didn't like early on. Real people are like, the only real people early on are tiny
Right.
and underfoot and squished by the giant assassin.
Right.
So at no point, like for me, how big is this? What is the scale? And that kind of wonderment is kind of amazing. The moment you add humans back into it and everything's just normal scale, suddenly like that breaks. And suddenly it just becomes our space instead of this space. And again, like Corpse Bride is stylized for a reason. Nightmare Before Christmas, all of these things, we don't really know how big anything is, how small it is, what things are made of. And that kind of is the magic of stop motion. And it's where the magic of this early on to me disappears about, again, 30 minutes in, it hits a really hard wall. There's still
So
amazing
for you,
shots also
it's-
to the end. I just want to say, like, there's also great shots throughout the
It's-
rest of the film.
right.
Like, they still do amazing stop motion shit later on. that's incredible. The two monsters fighting, the little like weird troll mutant,
the alchemist,
hunchback dude. The alchemist is incredible. Like his
great.
movements are absolutely astonishing. Some of his stuff, it felt human. It was creepy.
The fucking two rancors with shovels fighting.
100%.
So cool. So cool. Yeah. So when it comes down to it for you, it's just the promise is just not kept 100% of the time, and you would prefer that it does. And I agree. I think that's a fair, assumption that one should make when they walk into a movie. And this one did not do that. But it did give. I just think that the runtime was long. That's all.
And it was like 82 minutes. But how fitting is it that a film made or whose central message could be, well, it's open to interpretation, but could be nothing matters, everything is hopeless. How funny is it that halfway through the movie he's like, I'm not into this, and didn't try as hard. You know what I mean? Who cares? This doesn't matter. I don't know. It almost fits that it has a nihilistic second half, or because a true nihilist wouldn't ever make a movie, right? Or I feel like if you're in the depths of that, you wouldn't have the wherewithal to do stop motion. That's for sure. It's very high effort for a nihilist.
I think it was a passion project, and 30 years is a long time. And he did some amazing work. And then at a certain point he was like, I have to finish this, and it's so good, and so I have to finish it really well. And then other stuff he's like, I don't know, something has to go here, and I never really thought it out. Coming back to it 15 years later, but I gotta knock this out of the park because the Kickstarter, that's fine. And you're absolutely right.
But it ultimately didn't it kind of like this film was made sort of, and you open with the line, we're extinct. This is the end. Like, what's the line from Jurassic Park that they took from him when he saw the CG?
Oh, he's like, yeah. We're extinct. Yeah.
But like, he kind of made a film early on that, hey, this is why we shouldn't be. And then kind of showed why they are.
Right.
Like it kind of
because it became too hard. Like it would have been easier to just CG this. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, because that gets into assessing the value of mediums. I don't necessarily agree with that, because like Leica is doing amazing stuff in stop motion, much more interesting things that I've seen by any visual effects house going on right now.
I'm not saying stop motion can't be good. I'm saying this is where it goes wrong.
This was not built like a film is typically built. Like, Lisa, all the films that we've referenced as good, any Leica film, that is built by a village of people doing with writers, with cinematographers, with editors. Not that this film didn't have those things, but it was made on the back of one man with his limitations such as they are. I think that's fine. I think we can cut him some of that slack.
No. Again, I recommend it. Like, I'm not saying that I hated this film or anything. I adore it, and I'm actively searching for a Blu-ray copy. Because I really would love to see it in that, and it's impossible to find because they only printed them for Kickstarter backers, which is fine. I'm not paying $150 for this movie, though. I think would be the other way I'd put it, which is what the Blu-ray currently is costing. And it's like, it's amazing, and there are parts of this that are genuinely breathtaking. And if it had been a 20-minute nihilistic film about man's inhumanity towards man and where we end up in a cyclical hell of our own making, beautiful. Like, beautiful. And it should have just embraced what it was and gone with that.
Yeah. But that ain't who Phil Tippett is, apparently.
No, Starship Troopers 2. Have you seen it?
Oh, no.
You should.
Oh,
really?
No.
Because you should, because you'll go, oh, because it's to the earlier point about like the critique of capitalism. Like all he did here is just like a stop motion version of Modern Times. Like that's really what the factory is, and it add with gross shit at it. Modern Times is a genuine critique versus this that is kind of like a ham-fisted, smack you in the face. Hey, and Starship Troopers 2 has some of that, because the first film, if you didn't know,
maybe I'll check it out,
is a phenomenally interesting subversive text about fascism.
We've covered
Oh,
it.
of
Yes.
course.
I know you have. I've listened to it. That was my joke. But the second one is we'll say not.
Is not?
They
Yeah,
lost
I mean,
the satire angle.
we also
yeah.
probably, I won't be rewatching my, college film, anytime soon either, for the same reason. It's meandering and does what it wants because I was more enraptured by the technology that was like behind it, and the fact that I had to make it for a class that was based around technology, that when you put it down on paper and like, what's the story about? It's like, I don't know, man. And I think that that's the situation, obviously that we're dealing with here.
Yeah.
And that's so I probably won't watch Starship Troopers 2, is I guess what I'm saying.
You will
Fair
eventually. I bet you
I
will.
mean,
You
there's only
fucking
so
will.
many movies.
Exactly.
There's only so
You'll
many
get to
movies.
it eventually in the rotation. As we wrap up here, my final thought, do y'all notice how out of tone the end credits song is? It's like, it sounds like the Wall-E music when they're like repairing the world at the end.
It's in my notes. I forgot to mention it. It is insane.
Mm-hmm.
Completely out of tone. I love, you watch this 80-minute epic of like what hell would be like, and then the credits come in and it's like doot 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 doot. It's just very
like,
upbeat.
Hell yeah, toe tapping.
Yeah, Phil Tippett.
It's toe tapping hell.
Yeah.
I also got, the only thing that I have in my note that I wanted to push is there's like 2 or 3 times that I got. Have you played? You both are gamers. You played the video game Inside. I got a strong sense of that. In fact, that several times in the opening 30 minutes, in order to traverse the enormous city landscapes that the assassin is walking through, several times they do like a side-scrolling shot to reveal more monstrosities as we pan from like left to right, and I'm just like, not only is like the bulbous masses that like make up most of the characters in this much like the video game Inside, they even are doing side-scrolling like tactics that Inside uses, because that's the framework. It's platformer, so that's just how Inside works as a video game. And so I just wanted to mention that because I thought that was pretty cool that they're kind of, I don't know, there's a lot of similarity there.
Agreed. It definitely made me think of Inside, which is also a piece of fiction that I find really compelling and impactful, but I couldn't really fully tell you what it's about.
Yeah, exactly.
Nor could I even defend, like I can't even necessarily claim that it's all intentional and it all makes sense. It could just be a bunch of imagery crammed together for all I know. Good though.
There's another one that I wanted to mention, which is that at one point the assassin hotwires a car and a radio turns on.
Oh yeah.
And that means that somewhere in this world there's a DJ.
Someone's
It was
broadcasting.
super weird.
Yeah.
The baby sounds coming over the broadcast that is
right.
Like there's
what is that?
It's one of those things. Neil Breen is one of my favorite shitty filmmakers, one of the best of all time.
Right.
And someone asked him once about there's this scene early in one of his films where he's got like 3 baby heads in the desert and one's turned differently than the others. And someone asked him like what is the meaning of that, and he said, "I leave it to the audience," which is like the greatest line in the history of the world.
Mm-hmm.
But like that, a lot of stuff in this feels like
I don't know
that, where it's like, why is it a baby manager slave driver in the factory that's running shit people? It's not a thing that,
because managers are babies, baby.
Yeah, I leave it to the audience to divine their own meaning.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, there's a lot of stuff in here where it's like, no, that's not how symbolism works. You got to at least pay something off.
I just like the idea of a DJ playing the hits to this hell landscape. The top 40 hell tracks.
I also, the nurse has to sleep on hay, and she has her own room.
Yeah.
In hell.
Good for her, though. She
sleeps?
She sleeps.
It just feels like cool. There's what?
No logistical, nothing works on that level in the movie. I like, who's tending to that monkey that's getting electrocuted over and over in that room with the doll that
is it just forever?
I'll give infinite torture a pass. I will give infinite torture a pass. Once we start talking about like the Like they literally go out of their way to show the
To be like,
logistics
the
of this
demon
weird
sleeps
hospital.
in this room. And you're like, since when? Why? Don't explain.
Like,
why.
Why do we care?
You don't need
Oh,
to
that's
show
a cool
me.
room.
You don't need to. It is. It's hay on the ground in front of metal.
Pretty cool.
It says you don't have to show me that. Why did you show me that? Oh, you needed to
you're
pad
absolutely
runtime.
right.
That's right. I forgot.
You wanted that shot where she opens her eyes real wide when the baby screams. That's all.
Yeah, that's right.
My last question is, and I'm genuinely wondering, does anyone have any read on what the fuck the eye is at the beginning and the end? Like the post credits eye?
Right.
And how that ties into anything?
Oh,
well,
right.
it opens with an eye opening and we zoom into the pupil. Then the whole movie transpires. And then after the credits, an eye closes. So the only thing, I just thought it was as simple as all of life transpires within your mind, right? Life is only perception. I mean, but it's like, what's the point of saying that? Who cares?
Mm-hmm.
If that is the intended meaning. That's all I got from it, is like, stories exist in our brain, right? Behind our eyes. I'm like, yeah, that's true. That's all I got.
That's all. Yeah,
I'm
I mean,
standing here with moths coming out of my inside out pockets.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Because I literally have less than that. So at least you got the mods.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Speaking of moths.
Especially, I just, the first time I watched it, the music and the credits and then the eye, just like, it just doesn't work.
It's over the top in the way where at that point you're like, all right, you're trying too hard. Wrap it up. I agree with that. Yeah.
You should, by the way, find the music and dub it in right here, just over the close of this.
Well,
Because you
yeah. Let's ride out on the credits, the Phil Tippett's Mad God credit theme. Let's do that.
Because it's
You got
serious
it.
and dark with murder and rape and everything. And then here you go.
But before we do, Brooks, I mean,
Yes, sir.
I know some of this just from knowing you, but I don't know what phase. Is there anything you want to plug or promote now here?
It's my fun spare time. I run the largest Deleuze and Guattari reading group that there is. You can jump on Discord, discord.dg/DGQC. We read Deleuze works. That's what we do. We explain it. And we're going to be starting a series of books that may be important and you guys may care about, called the Cinema Series, which is Deleuze's reading of how movies work. And it's one of my favorite sets of his books. So we have What is Philosophy coming up in 2 weeks or a week and a half. We just finished Logic of Sense and we got Anti-Oedipus starting again. We just do a bunch of readings and I just love it. And if you're interested in that kind of shit, Google us, Deleuze and Guattari Quarantine Collective.
Nice.
Thank you so much.
I
Good
learned
stuff.
how to spell
Good
those
stuff.
names from knowing you.
Yeah, we are the people who like the weird movies. That is our people.
True.
So
For more weird movies, God, we did. Yeah, Last Temptation, that's not that weird. We just did Greasy Strangler, though. That's pretty damn
We've been
weird.
doing
We've been doing some
I'm
weird
so
movies
upset.
lately.
I'm so upset I
We've
didn't
been
get
doing
called for
some-
that. That's the best.
Sorry.
Such a good movie. Such a good movie.
Abe did
We also
Potato?
did Southland Tales last month.
Potato?
Oh my god.
Potato?
Oh,
I'm
Potato,
sorry.
potato,
I must
potato.
know what these chips are made of. Oh, jeez.
I
All right.
fucking hated it.
We'll be back
I
next
hated
time
it
on
so
Frame
much,
Rate with
Brooks.
something like, I don't know, National Lampoon's Vacation or some real normal shit.
Yeah, let's fucking. Yeah. Can we just do one? We're gonna cover.
Oh, I'm thinking of
Possessor.
ending things. That's a great idea.
No,
Abe.
we're doing Fury Road's coming
Never.
up. There's a good normal
Fury
one.
Road.
Fury Road, all right?
Fury Road's coming up at some
Yeah,
point.
tune in for
this
that.
month.
You can find all our podcasts, including exclusive Patreon-only podcasts like Spiel Boys and Star Trek: The Next Futurama, over at patreon.com/smallbeans. You can follow me at Swaim_Corp on Twitter. You can follow Abe at Abe the Mighty on Twitter. All one
Thank you.
word. I think that's that. Yeah?
Yep, that's that. That's that.
All right. Thanks again to Brooks. Thanks for taking the time.
Brooks. Yes.
Really
Thank you.
I'm very happy
Appreciate you.
to. I always love talking with you guys about this stuff. I literally could do it anytime.
Yeah.
So I'm
Quite
around.
a pleasure. Till next time, that's us.
We love you.
We love you.
This has been a Small Beans endeavor. We're a bunch of pals who make podcasts, sketches, music, web series, and movies. The beans always have new ideas percolating, so make sure to check us out at patreon.com/smallbeans. That's patreon.com/smallbeans, where you can browse all of our current and past content, see what we've got planned in the future, and learn how your support can help the small beans grow into huge, giant monster beans. If you enjoyed this content module, please like, rate, subscribe, or tell a friend about us. We love you!